Hi everyone, we got cut off in the other video, so this is part 2 of the Unit 3 IP. Unit 3 is being continued. Okay, so as I was saying in the last video, I was taking the weft from number 64, the drapery casement. This is it. So you're gonna hold it like this, and you're gonna untwist it, and we're gonna count how many times it takes to untwist it. 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, I'm gonna hold it, 5, 6, it's about 6, possibly 7. So when I untwisted it, you could tell it's untwisting into 2 separate yarns, okay? There are 2 separate yarns, and then when I look at this one a little bit further, it's just going into fibers. It's not separating into additional yarns. From what I could tell, it looks like it's just a bunch of fibers put together. It's not separate yarns. It's all a bunch of fibers separated. You don't see other yarns. See how they're not twisted? If you look at it closely, you'll notice that it's not twisted. I'm gonna look at the other one too. Yep, it just looks like it's one yarn full of fibers. See? Full of their fibers. And you wanna then mark that information in your chart. So from what I could see here, if you can pull it out, you're gonna notice that these are long. Okay, these are long and smooth. So what does long and smooth mean? Think about that. Is it filament? Is it staple? Now that you've checked it, you could see what it looks like. Does it look crimped? Does it look soft? Okay, so it took 5 turns per inch to get this to unravel, correct? And when we unraveled it, we noticed it was 2 separate yarns. So you're gonna take your chart for the warp in number 64, and you're gonna look for number 5, which is the TPI, and for the weft, the first one, I'm gonna put that it is a 5 TPI, 5 TPI. Okay, now we did have another warp in there, so I'm gonna have a number 2. Okay, and that other one was this very thin nylon. And when I tried to untwist this, you wanna hold this for me, helper? And when I try to untwist this, it doesn't. Okay, it's a nylon, it's very strong. It doesn't seem to have any turns per inch. So the other one is going to be 0 TPI. Okay, so if you're watching this, you should be doing this as well so you could see it for yourself. We saw that the number 1, okay, that I looked at, which was the thicker one of the 2. Oops, I'm marking in the wrong place. Number 1. For number 4, it says describe the ply of each warp and filling. Okay, well, number 1, the 5 TPI turned into 2 ply. So I'm going to put 2 ply. And then for number 2, the one that had no TPIs, it's a single, okay? It's a single ply, because it doesn't do anything. It's in its simplest form. And then I also have to decide all of these other questions. Number 1, the yarn size, etc. So now you can go from number 1 and say, well, is it thick, thin, etc. I'm going to say for this purpose that it is thick. Okay, number 1 was thick, the first one that I did. Number 2, the other one that I did, let's say was thin. Okay, so you're always going to have a 1 and 2 if you have more than one weft. For number 2, it says describe the warp and the fill as a filament or staple for each one. Again, for number 1, I'm going to look it up and see what it says, if the mode acrylic is filament or staple, and I'm going to say it's filament. Or maybe I'm going to say it's staple. You have to decide. I have a piece of tape here, so it's not writing very well. And number 2, my nylon looked like it was a filament, and I have to decide why. What did I read in the book that told me that that was a filament? So perhaps I'm going to look at the look of it. We saw that it was long and smooth for the first one. Maybe it is filament because of that reason. I'm going to look up mode acrylic too and see how often the United States does it in filament or staple fibers. If it says in the book, well, it's cut in filament or staple, I'm going to say, well, according to the book, it says that it could be done in filament or staple, but upon looking at it and analyzing the fiber, I noticed that it was long and smooth, and therefore I believe that it is a filament fiber. If the book says it's filament or staple, but I noticed that there were short fibers, they had protruding fibers around it, I may say that it's the staple fiber. If I notice that one of the swatches is made out of cotton, more than likely I'm automatically going to know it's a staple fiber because cotton comes in a staple format. Okay, so that's how you answer number 3. Make sure you use in-text citation for number 3. You need it because you should be researching that. And for number 6, okay, describe the aesthetics of the fabric. Well, look at the aesthetics of the fabric, okay, and tell me, according to the fiber that we saw, the smoothness in it, what about it gives it this look? What about the weave? What about the cover? Okay, so maybe the weave, since it was a 2-ply, it makes it thicker. Since it had a lot of fibers, when we took it apart, you noticed there were a lot of fibers. Correct? There were a ton of fibers and therefore making it thicker. All these fibers create a thicker ply. Then you double that up, you have a thicker fabric. So you could talk about it in that manner and talk about why you got that look. This one was from, pushing this apart, this one was from the China silk. Well, let's see, not the China silk. This one was from the antique satin, number 49. And if you look, you're going to notice that when this one unravels, help her please. Excuse me for clearing my throat. You're going to notice that in this one, lift it up a little please. Here, right here. Okay. You're going to notice that when I try to undo this one and untwist it, it's going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It may take a few more times, but I'm going to take us to the end. And you're going to notice that it doesn't go into more than 1 ply. It's already just one single yarn, one single ply that's turning into fibers. See that? So this is not a 2-ply yarn right here. This is a single ply because it's just jumping into its fibers. It's kind of difficult to show because it's small. But this is how you should be taking apart. If you want, even use a needle to stick in between to help you get in between. But then I could see the fibers, pull them out, see if they're long, short, and so forth, okay? That's how you handle this assignment. That was the antique satin. Going back to the drapery casement, this is one of the other yarns that were in there. This is actually the warp yarn. The warp yarn, doing this apart, taking this apart again, and untwisting it, untwist it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, oops. I would say that it was about 10 times possibly. You're gonna have to undo it yourself and notice approximately how many times it takes. And then when you undo it, notice that it too unravels. You could tell right here that it's unraveling into 2 yarns. See that space in between? So we're going to take that, separate that, and see if we have more yarns, which I doubt. But anyway, this warp from the drapery casement would also be a 2-ply yarn. Okay, see that? It's turning into 2. And then we unravel this and check to see what this looks like when we take it apart. Look at the fibers, see how long they are, see how smooth they are, and answer the rest of your questions. Well, I hope that this helped you in your assignment for this week, at least to try to make it a little bit more clear for you. Again, after you do each warp and each weft, again, you're going to have more than one warp in some of them, maybe not in others, okay? For example, the antique satin, you're gonna have one warp, one weft, okay? But in 64, you're gonna have more than one weft as an example here. So you would list 2 of them there. And hopefully you'll get your assignment done and turned in well. Hopefully this helped you. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of the week. Bye-bye.